Hello. There are a lot of things humans are smart enough to understand. But yet, there are some that we just simply can't, or maybe shouldn't. To think that human beings as a race have evolved from cavemen and hunter-gatherer societies to exploring the cosmos and beyond. It's a wonder as to what the true limits of human potential are. With every decade, and nowadays every passing day it seems, it's as though we are destined to continuously gain knowledge and skills that our forefathers could only dream of. And yet there are still things that escape our needy grasp and hunger for understanding, and they just might possibly be for the rest of time. So, because I'm worried that this video might be very long, and also because I know that you didn't come here to listen to an intro, let's jump right into the incomprehensible/unexplainable subjects iceberg. If you don't know what an iceberg video is, let me explain, and also show the methods I will be using for this said iceberg video. Iceberg images, such as this one, are images showing the many levels and depths that go into a topic from the most common and well-known at the top, to fringe wild instances of barely known or wildly out there towards the bottom. And while I will be adhering to the basics of a usual iceberg, I will also be going in the order of easiest to, quote, comprehend, or phenomenon that people can usually make assumptions on, or ones that we as a race have pretty concrete theories on, to the hardest or somewhat impossible to comprehend towards the bottom. This is, of course, my own understanding, and knowledge putting these topics where I think they should go in terms of comprehension and how understandable they are. And after reading and researching for multiple days on just some singular topics, including buying a book, yes, a physical book in the year of our Lord 2023, I will explain to the best of my ability what all of these topics of discussion are and why my brain hurts so much. I am not a scientist, I am not a physicist, I do not have a degree in any of the topics covered in this video. That is a warning, and I do not plan on it after trying to summarize these things that humans can't comprehend. One last thing, a lot of these topics aren't inherently bad, negative, or sad exactly, but some of them do deal with topics of discussion that may or not line up with one's belief system, especially towards the bottom of the iceberg. Got it? Good. So without further ado, here is the incomprehensible/unexplainable subjects iceberg. This is going to be a long video, and this is only the first part. Stay tuned till the very end, and I'll give you some more information about the rest of the video. Until then, though, just enjoy. Above the iceberg. Pigeon homing. Pigeons that are specifically trained and raised to be homing pigeons have an otherworldly ability to find their way back to their base. If you were to take a bred homing pigeon and set its base somewhere in England and take it to Germany, let's say, there's a high chance that the pigeon will be able to make its way back perfectly fine to the base in England. And these birds aren't slow either. With an average speed of over 60 miles per hour, homing pigeons are specifically trained and bred birds with an uncanny ability to find their way back home, even if it's not on purpose. There's a story of a homing pigeon being bought and shipped to Sri Lanka, only for it to be released and to fly back to its home in Germany. Allegedly, the longest ever journey of a homing pigeon is of it being released in Arras, France, and it was able to make it all the way to Saigon, Vietnam in 1931. That's 7,200 miles in 24 days, by the way. But we know these birds are great at their job, and without going into it, why there are such a high amount of them in older, larger cities. It was their job to get home. But how do these birds work? Of course, they have to be bred and trained to return home by ensuring that the birds have incentive to return to their home base with food or some other offering. But aside from taking them further and further distances from a young age, we can't nail down how they're able to make these incredible treks across the lands. There are three main theories as to the navigation of these birds: true navigation, magnetic orientation, and olfactory navigation. But none of these seem to nail down how homing pigeons really work. True navigation is the ability to see and use familiar areas like landmarks and roads when flying, and use that information to guide themselves back home. But this doesn't explain how homing pigeons are able to find their way home over large distances, especially over areas where they haven't flown or been to before. Next is magnetic orientation, which is the ability to use Earth's magnetic field to find their way home like a compass. Some scientists have even gone so far as to say that homing pigeons have iron particles in their beak to allow them to remain aligned with the north. Again, a problem arises though with this method, as a compass is no good without a map in human terms. Birds can't use maps, it's pretty simple. If these birds had a sense of north and no way of indicating which direction from north they should fly to return home, the compass is essentially useless. And finally, olfactory navigation. Olfactory navigation is using the sense of smell to hone in back to their path back home, with some scientists believing that this allows the birds the ability to orient themselves by learning the rough composition of atmospheric odors and their spatial disposition compared to winds that come from different directions to navigate. Do I know what that means? No, I don't. I'm glad I wrote that. But that's the best that scientists have been able to come up with for these birds. Most believe that homing pigeons must use a mix of all of these to be able to get to their home base without an issue. But right now, scientists are still doing the introductory phases and steps in learning how these marvelous birds work and operate. And maybe soon, we'll be able to get our answer about these birds. Spontaneous combustion. Spontaneous combustion is the outbreak of fire without application of heat from an outside source. Most people have heard about the human variety of this phenomena, and while that's the wildest form and the most discussed form online of spontaneous combustion, there are quite a few other ways things just spontaneously ignite. Lots of things you might hope wouldn't catch fire in large quantities can be affected by spontaneous combustion. Cotton, coal, hay, and pistachios, to name a few. Hay and compost can self-ignite because of bacterial fermentation, which causes oxidation, which in turn causes them to self-ignite. Pretty self-explanatory. Cotton can begin to combust at around 764 degrees Fahrenheit if the cotton degrades enough on a microbiological level. That's a word I didn't think I would have to ever say. Usually, this means the amount of cotton needs to be extremely high and contaminated by something like a paint, a varnish, or linseed oil like it was back in the day. If these conditions are met and there's a high enough quantity of cotton, the slow buildup of heat from self-heating to smoldering to open flame begins, thus leading to spontaneous combustion. Coal can spontaneously self-heat and self-ignite when a few conditions are met. The Titanic's coal was on fire. I just had to throw this out there. The Titanic's coal was on fire, quote, from the day they put out of Southampton until it hit the iceberg. That's how common it is. It's pretty common and scientists are still hammering out the details, but they've got it pretty much nailed down. Now here's the wild one. I just want to say this right now. Pistachios can spontaneously explode. Sorry, jumped over spontaneously combust there, but I thought I should just go straight to explode because if that's on the table, that's where we're gonna go. And while yes, exploding and combusting is crazy, these nuts take in so much oxygen even when picked that if you were in an enclosed room with a large enough amount of pistachios, you would suffocate, just as a thought. But aside from one of my new irrational fears, pistachios are very known for spontaneously combusting because of their fat content and taking in high amounts of oxygen. If the humidity and pressure is wrong or just right if you're on the side of the pistachios in the pistachio war, the nuts can break down fat and continue to take in oxygen while releasing carbon dioxide in a process that's more commonly known as burning or exploding. Yeah, this is one that is very well documented and easily understood on the chemistry level, but I couldn't not include pistachios. Humans, the one we're really here for. Spontaneous human combustion is as it sounds. The spontaneous combustion of a human being, alive or recently dead, without an external source of ignition. Most recorded cases of spontaneous human combustion, I will be calling it SHC going forward by the way, involve the affected having alcohol in some way or the other, as well as some parts of the leg or feet remaining intact. Humans have been recorded over the last 300 years to have spontaneously combust about 200 times. And while the chances aren't zero, they most certainly aren't enough to be that worried about it. Old theories on the subject relay back to the theory of humors in the body and an imbalance, which causes the affected to spontaneously combust. Or that the affected partook in alcohol, which rendered the body flammable. Neither of these work, though, as the first is a long disproven theory in the humoral theory of medicine, and the second wouldn't even be possible if the persons were possibly the most intoxicated a human could be, because it would still require a source of ignition. Most cases of alleged recorded SHC involve people that are older, or in some other form or the other having a limited form of mobility due to age or obesity. While most scientists nowadays think that SHC isn't possible at all and could all be an example of natural causes like someone falling asleep with a lit cigarette, there are a few speculated cases with nothing tacked down quite yet. Brian J. Ford offered up that ketosis could be a possible explanation as people that partake in low-carb diets or suffer from alcoholism allows the body to produce acetone, which is highly flammable and would lead to a spontaneous human combustion. A leading theory outside of unfortunate circumstances like cigarette sleeping is the wick effect. It's not the movie, which is when a small external flame warms the clothing and causes human fat to melt into the clothing, acting as a reverse candle. Even the most fit of people will still have fat in their body, and like I said before, most cases of SHC involve people that are obese or can't move that much, so a buildup of fat is expected. There are other accounts and theories that I want to go over real quick, such as that SHC is caused by poltergeists and spirits needing a new host and entering or leaving the body, immolating it in the process. Some believe that eating or breathing in phosphorus in some capacity causes phosphine in the body, which is known to spontaneously combust on its own. And lastly, there's the theory that ball lightning is involved. What is ball lightning? Well, let me tell you. Ball lightning. Ball lightning is the rare phenomenon of a luminous sphere appearing, usually near the ground during thunderstorms, measuring on average several centimeters in diameter. It has been associated with cloud-to-ground lightning, and while some have associated ball lightning with it, it is entirely distinct from St. Elmo's fire. The very descriptions and characteristics of ball lightning are some of the main reasons why it's hard to characterize or nail down at all, as ball lightning has been observed to be between pea-sized and up to a meter in diameter, as well as it being red, orange, yellow, white, or blue in color, and only lasts on average a few seconds. While ball lightning is usually not damaging or dangerous, it has appeared and shown to occasionally explode violently, or dissipate, leaving behind the smell of burning sulfur or ozone in the area. This is why some people believe that ball lightning is the cause of occasional SHC, as it still has been shown to release heat after expulsion of the energy. Scientists, while proposing a number of hypotheses and being close to recreating what they believe to be an instance of ball lightning, have had a hard time replicating the data or finding substantial findings to classify ball lightning as its own distinct phenomenon to this day. Of these many theories and explanations, there are about 15 that have various scientific names and use of words that would require their own video or even icebergs to get into. This have ranged from air and gas behaving abnormally, vaporized silicon forming into a gas ball of energy, to microwave radiation being trapped within a plasma bubble. If you want a deeper dive into ball lightning, you can go check out Joe Scott. He did an entire video on this topic 3 years ago that helps explain the concept without having roughly 30 other topics to cover in the same video. And speaking of the next topic, Great Sheep Panic. The Great Sheep Panic, or the Great Sheep Panic of 1888, if you like numbers, was an event that took place on November 3rd, 1888 in Oxfordshire, England, that involved tens of thousands of sheep over the course of 200 square miles, reportedly escaping their enclosures, going berserk, destroying property, and causing mayhem. And while yes, sheep are known for being sheepish and scaring easily, this amount of sheep in the tens of thousands at roughly the exact same time freaking out and panicking to the point that the farmer said that the sheep looked terror-stricken and were hiding in bushes, hedges, and crowding corners hasn't been able to be explained. Now, some have tried to explain this away as a case of ruffians or the uncultured youth scaring up the sheep, but the scale of this event was unprecedented and way too large for it all to have been done by the neighborhood kids. Another explanation was possibly some dog or fox happened to scare the sheep, but that still doesn't explain the fact that the sheep across counties were all scared simultaneously. The leading theory of the time, and most believed theory now, was that the event was caused by thunder and lightning in the area on the night of the Great Sheep Panic. This theory has its doubters though, as lightning has pretty much happened everywhere, and has happened plenty of times before and after this, and while there are other cases of sheep panic in the area, none were quite to this level. And lastly, the more out there theories on the Great Sheep Panic were that there was either a meteoric blast or earthquake in the area which would have scared all the sheep. Or, on the night of the Great Sheep Panic, an unidentified large dark cloud touched the ground in the area of Oxfordshire and covered the sheep and people living in the area in such a pitch black darkness that this induced mass hysteria in the sheep. Neither of the latter two theories have had as much scientific backing, as there were no reported meteors or rumblings in the earth by anyone in the area, as well as this dark cloud phenomenon that is described doesn't fit any known type of cloud, or any as of yet known meteorological phenomenon at all. So to this day, there is still no definitive answer, and we truly may never know what the true cause of this Great Sheep Panic was. The tip of the iceberg. ASASSN-V J213939.3-702817.4. That word, I can't and won't repeat all those letters and numbers, so I'm going to call it the Assassin Star because that sounds cool, is a name given to a star in our galaxy, among a few others that have had a very peculiar trait. It dims. That's it. No, I'm just kidding. While this has been shown before in other stars called variable stars, which is a star whose brightness changes with time, there are other stars like Tabby's star that shouldn't do this. The fact that a constant star in our galaxy began to show signs of dimming only for it to return to its original brightness is stunning to scientists. While stars do occasionally get brighter and darker, they can usually tell if that's caused by planets or exoplanets crossing in between the star and us, stardust, or binary stars that rotate each other. But a constant star shouldn't get dimmer and then return back to its original state of brightness, and scientists are having a very hard time figuring out why. There's another star very similar to this assassin star called Tabby's star that is dimmed and then returned back to its original brightness multiple times. But at sporadic intervals, there's no pattern to the madness yet. The best theories we have on why these stars are awkwardly dimming and then slowly returning to their original brightness ranges from these stars eating planets, to aliens creating megastructures to harness the power of their stars, such as with a Dyson swarm. Maybe I should have put this deeper in the iceberg, or maybe I shouldn't have, you'll just have to see. Ashen Light. Ashen Light is the theorized illuminating glow of the dark side of Venus. The theory that the dark side of Venus glows goes all the way back to the 17th century, when an Italian astronomer named Giovanni Riccioli, I hope I said that right, saw what he reported to be a faintish gray light on the dark side of Venus that he dubbed the Ashen Light of Venus, hence why it's called the Ashen Light. There have been many reported sightings since over the next 300 plus years from many astronomers, but many more that haven't been able to see it. Such as Edward Emerson Barnard, who had observed Venus for over 18 years, weren't ever able to see this Ashen Light. All observations of Ashen Light are visual by the astronomers themselves, so there's no tangible proof that the phenomenon is even real. While there's still a select group of astronomers going back centuries that are quite sure and set on the fact that there is an odd glow to the dark side of Venus, as late as 2015, instances of occurrence of Ashen Light have had extremely suitable conditions to be recorded and planned, with still no concrete proof able to come out. The hardest part so far about any alleged sightings of Ashen Light is that it's never been recorded or photographed. The astronomy community has many theories about how this space light is even possible. The best, and most likely in no particular order, are massive lightning storms all happening simultaneously, causing a glow to form. It's possible that the light is caused by fireworks from the Venusians celebrating the ascension of their new emperor. And possibly it's just oxygen reaching a certain point in the atmosphere and emitting light. One thing is certain though, in the end, whether it's real or not, space has a lot of mysteries that we just simply can't or don't understand. I've left out about 5 or 6 different space unknowns that I am just not qualified to explain, let me just be honest. As well as I didn't want every other entry on this list to be about some far-off space thing that uses bigger words than I have any right using. For example, since the initial writing of this video, an entirely huge new way of seeing and exploring the universe was brought forward that could possibly change your outlook on not just space, but gravity and the galaxy itself, with the Pulsar Timing Array. I am not even going to begin to act like I know the bare minimum to these, but they are allowing scientists to see and observe space-time comprehensions, gravitational waves across the universe, and use pulsars to learn about the universe, which is giving us a deeper and more well-informed look on the universe. Hank Green put it in terms even I could understand in a tweet. At Hank Green, TLDR EL5 on pulsar timing arrays. Remember when the first telescope got made and then we spent 400 years continuously upgrading both the telescopes and our understanding of the universe? Well, that's happening again. We have a whole new universe detector. That is incredible and should in no way be understated, but we don't know right now what all it will or won't change our understanding or knowledge of. We just have to keep looking to the future and trying to understand more and more. Plague of Athens. The Plague of Athens was an outbreak of mysterious plague in 430 BCE, the second year of the Peloponnesian War, that killed between a fourth and a third of the populations of Athens itself. The outbreak persisted for 4 years and no one knows what it exactly was. With the waging Peloponnesian War, the Athenians were a major maritime powerhouse against their almost entirely land-based opponents of Sparta. So when Sparta began a campaign on land, the Athenians, under the direction of Pericles, were forced to retreat into the city walls of Athens itself, while their navy was used to harass their Spartan troops. With Athens already being heavily populated, and an influx of soldiers from the war as well as refugees coming into the city, it resulted in overpopulation and even poorer hygiene standards than before that was a perfect breeding ground for disease. While we know that this plague existed and that lots of people died from this outbreak, it oddly was limited to only the Athenians during the war, leading many to believe that biological warfare or possibly poisoned water supplies were to blame for this so-called plague. While we do indeed have a much sooner example of a sweeping illness killing close to 1/3 of a population, there are definitely parallels recorded between the Plague of Athens and other historical plagues such as the Black Death. Many didn't care about Law & Order, not the television show, and showed that many people ceased to care whether they lived or died, whether they had money or not, or the well-being of those around them. This is more widely attributed to a sense of borderland hysteria that seems to have fallen across many that lived through the time. The recorded symptoms of this mystery plague were recorded by one Thucydides, and if you have sympathy pains like I do, maybe skip these descriptions, which included violent heats in the head, a redness, and inflammation of the eyes. The throat and tongue would quickly become suffused with blood. breath would become unnatural and fetid. Sneezing, hoarseness, violent coughing, vomiting, retching, violent convulsions, all while the body was extremely not so hot to the touch, nor yet pale. A livid color inkling to red, and breaking out in pustules and ulcers. With all of these descriptions by Thucydides, who even reportedly by himself was afflicted by the plague of Athens, it's where the mystery truly arises. There are reportedly over 10 different speculated diseases and afflictions that could have befallen the people of Athens, and we're only slightly better than we were centuries ago in determining exactly what it was. Originally, scientists and historians were quick to label this as another unfortunate example of the bubonic plague. But nowadays, with the previously mentioned descriptions of symptoms, that has been all but ruled out. Nowadays, the plague of Athens is attributed to anything from measles to typhus, an ergot toxin, glanders, smallpox, an unknown bacterial infection, an unknown fungal poisoning, and more modernly an Ebola-like virus. And yet the scientific and scholarly community has yet to accept any of these as the confirmed fatal disease. Weirdest yet of all is Thucydides himself, as there seems to be a lot lost in translation, as well as why he even included this outbreak in his book, as he wasn't a medical professional of any degree, so his reliability on symptoms has been called into question. A mass grave has recently been uncovered though, in hope that DNA and RNA analysis and other modern technologies would finally be able to put this all to rest. It remains unlikely though, as viruses degrade quickly over time, making even modern analysis extremely unlikely in the end. The Hollinwell Incident. The Hollinwell Incident was an incident, surprisingly, in 1980 in which hundreds of children began to suddenly collapse at an annual show held in a Nottinghamshire mining community. The event took place on the 13th of July, and was supposed to be a fun time for children to march in parades, get dressed up, and generally have fun. That's not what happened though. As buses showed up full of parents and their nervous children, things began to go bad quickly. Eyewitness accounts of the event say that sometime between 10:30 a.m. and 11:15 a.m., children began to collapse and faint, some even recounting that it seemed contagious. Ambulances began to show up, and then more ambulances, so many in fact that one witness of the event pointed out to the BBC that, quote, "One of the biggest frighteners was that many ambulances. People hadn't seen so many since the Second World War," end quote. Everything added to the panic, from the parents looking for their children and the madness, to police airing announcements over the PA system, which is why so many people explain this event away with mass hysteria. But there's more beneath the surface of this story. Children don't just pass out in the hundreds for no reason. Many reported symptoms of children's eyes and nose being red and sore, saying they don't feel well and can't sit up straight. Some children even reporting white, frothy foam coming from their mouths. Some even recounted leaving the event early and reporting symptoms later, which isn't usual with mass hysteria, if you could guess. In the end, around 400 people, many of them children, were taken to the hospital and released that day, with a few being held overnight, including 2 babies. Of course, if it's in this list, there's a reason people don't quite understand why this happened at all. For the longest time, the official reasoning and ruling of what happened that July morning was ruled as mass hysteria. Their reasoning being that most children that happened to faint were wearing tight-fitting uniforms and hats, and were all concentrated in the top corner of the field. And the fact that the children didn't all faint at the same time, but instead were affected over the course of roughly 2 hours, added to the theory that this was a form of mass hysteria. Many, if not most people nowadays, believe this to be entirely false though, as stated before. People who left the scene were reported being affected 2 hours later. Many also were quick to point out that many of the children affected were from working class families and homes, so the inquiry wasn't taken seriously at all compared to that if it had higher class citizens. Of course, many theories have been thrown out as to possibly what could have been the culprit, including gas leaking from the underneath mine shafts. Remember, this took place in a mining community. To pesticides in the nearby fields, water and food poisoning, or of course, the paranormal. The leading theory these days is much more sinister though. The initial report seems to point to a form of chemistry being at fault for the entire incident, and them going with mass hysteria instead, as it's more easily explained away without the need for a thorough investigation. Pesticides were sprayed 3 days before the event, which could possibly describe what happened, but is unlikely. The leading theory these days is a form of over-cleaning of the toilets, which led to the creation of chlorine gas in the area, which possibly resulted in gas drifting across the fields and causing the incident. This, of course, is still a theory, and we may truly never know the true culprit, or if it was multiple things going wrong to create a bad scenario for all. But in the end, we can just be thankful that no one died, and there are now very rigorous safety conditions employed these days to help make sure another Hollinwell incident doesn't happen. Telapa. Telapa is an unexplained glowing light phenomenon below the surface of the ocean that ancient and modern Polynesians used to navigate the Pacific. It's been described as a flash of bioluminescent light that emanates from a nearby island. So if you were to follow that direction the telapa came from, you would be on your way to an island. There was a belief back in the day in the scientific community that Polynesians happened to colonize islands almost by accident. This has been disproven in plenty of ways, that the ancient Polynesians used to navigate the seas that have all been explained by some form or another, such as using stars, wind, wave patterns, the swells of the ocean itself, and the flight patterns of birds. But telapa has remained unexplained all these years later, and the mere existence of telapa is looked down upon and unexplained by many modern scientists as a myth. A major reason for this is the fact that it has so rarely ever been seen, and especially not recorded or been able to be scientifically recreated at large. There are scientific research projects going on or being planned right now to hopefully help record telapa so it can be proven and therefore studied. But in the meantime, this seems like a perfect time to finally go beneath the surface to the third layer of the iceberg. So, if you've made it this far into the video, you can probably tell that this is not the entire incomprehensible / unexplainable iceberg, as you could probably guess. This video has taken a very long time. You're currently seeing the timeline of just what goes into editing, and this video is of course not just editing, it's actually researching, writing, animating, drawing, all that stuff. If you want to see this content come out faster and also support me making more silly videos like this, you can go to patreon.com/Gurdon. As well as you can also go to, if you've seen the little sneak previews and little things throughout the video, of putinyourSocialSecurity.com. This is a real website, and it'll just redirect you to my Patreon. I only have one patron right now. It's my friend Will Yum. His name is on screen. And you can also get this special treatment if you subscribe to Patreon. There's only one level right now. It is just a simple $2 a month pledge. The more and more people that subscribe to it, the more I will be pressured into releasing content faster. That's how my brain works. So right now, giving a shout out to Will Yum. If more and more people subscribe, or if more people like this content, I'll add more layers and tiers. Maybe your name will be in a rainbow if you subscribe at a higher rate, but right now there's just a $2 rate. But that's about it for right now. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed. And for this part 1, good night, and have a good day. Bye. And now that we're actually beneath the surface part of the iceberg chart, I'd like to stop into the YouTube thing and ask you to subscribe, like, hit the bell, and also remind you to stay hydrated for the rest of our journey today. If you haven't already, just a thought.